tokenizing. And to this effect, we have brought together a set of panelists to discuss this topic. I forgot to introduce myself, Mamadou TOURE, founder and CEO of the Ubuntu group, and Packle of Ubuntu tribe. So without further ado, I'm going to call upon the stage on the podium Mr. Charles de BOISRIOU, associate partner of at the Mazar Group, who is going to give us an introduction on the stakes of this topic. I'm also going to invite our friend Paul AITHNARD, Chairman and CEO of Ecobank West Africa, but also Yassin BAYO, CEO of Vista Group. So I'd like to really ask you to give a round of applause, because it's good when you clap, it makes the blood circulate after a meal. So Mr. Charles, please share with us your expertise on the issue.
Ok, vous m'entendez? Eh bien, on a compris qu'il y avait...
All right, can you hear me? We understood that there were essentially French speakers here in this panel, so we have considered that we could do it in French. If there is a problem to that, you can tell us in any case. So thank you for giving me the floor and giving the opportunity to introduce these panels. When I had the opportunity to exchange on this topic with Mamadou and Ramatoulaye a few weeks ago, we agreed to say that tokenizing is a concept that has a very strong potential for Africa, but that also required some precautions as far as using it. So we want to set the discussion in motion around this introduction. So first, what is tokenizing? So in a few words, tokenizing, a token is an active, a digital asset which is emitted and can be exchanged on the blockchain, and the price of which is submitted to the law of supply and demand. It is something that can be customized, something that can be transferred, without interventions of a third party, and it's something which is very liquid, like a fluid. The three categories, basically, we have the means of payment, we have the security token, and then we have the utility token, that is, which enables the company to pre-sell an asset or a service, and this is what we're talking about this afternoon. So tokenizing in Africa. So we have a lot of wealth in the soil and underground in Africa, and we know that, and that is an understatement. So we can see clearly that tokenizing is ways of accelerating the financing of the exploitation of these assets. For a long time, the banks and financial institutions, development banks, states, make with African countries, intermediary financing. And please bear with me. I must have gone too fast. So this is it. So intermediary financing to finance harvesting a campaign or assets, but we know that this intermediary financing come with shortcomings and challenges. First, the lack of capacity of the banks to turn around their for reasons of lack of liquidity, but also this can also introduce a risk of dependency toward the lending states when you are in a state-to-state lending financing. So tokenizing, it's something that brings. It's still is a financing. It's still a financing, but it doesn't change the nature. But it changes the process. The change of process is heavy with consequence, because we go with something which is intermediate to something which is totally decentralized, which makes it possible for the African economies to come out of an asymmetrical dialogue with the banks and with financial institutions, with the states, to enter direct deals with investors, whether these investors are African or it's from outside the continent of Africa. So in fact, as we speak, tokenizing is not just a concept, it is a reality, because we already have experiences of tokenizing that we'll be talking about in a short while, which was carried out in a certain number of countries in Africa, in Central Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria. Niger, for example, is getting ready to create a token which would be guaranteed, in fact, by the gold reserves of the country. So the train of tokenizing is already in motion. It's leaving the station, for better or for worse. So to conclude this introduction, so we have to see what would be the key element for this to be for the better rather than for the worse. So tokenizing is not it doesn't create an asset as such. It is just a way of monetizing an asset that already exists. So it is not. So to tokenize is not to create an asset, really. It's rather to just finance an already existing asset, so as to make possible its exploitation. So in fact, it's a kind of digital. So it's a type of security, in fact. So the risk that we've had with assets that were made into securities and were even backed by real estate loans. In the principle, they could also exist for African assets that would be tokenized. And there's also the industrial risk. That is, even the asset exists, the capability of an industrial operator to exploit these assets, because if they are not exploited, they don't really have a value. So since why I'm French, I like to recall for a little anecdote for the first two examples of mass security were made by the Kingdom of France at the 18th century to convert the debt of the kingdom once into assets along of Mississippi River, and at that time, which were in fact the assets of the church. This is what we call the creation of assignats. That's the money, paper money. These are type of security creations, and in these two cases, these led to financial catastrophes or disasters. Now, once have said this, and I was saying this, the train is leaving the station, so necessarily there is a role to be played for African finance. Because if African finance does not take upon itself this role, other financial institutions are going to do that in its place. So this is of interest for the regulators in Africa, but also the banks and stakeholders of finance. And finally, I think that the main need or the main role of African finance, including the operators, the market of regulators on this market, which is new, is to bring trust. The African finance should be bringing trust and confidence so that the train leaving the train leaving the station does not run into any accident. So trust in what? Trust in the reality of the assets and on the fact that the token which was issued is the owner of these assets, and so the capability of the industrial operator to exploit these oil fields and these mines and the information that would be communicated to the investors to enable them to appreciate the value of their token. And finally, in the trust in the security of the transactions that will be carried out on the primary market and the secondary market. And finally, for African finance, it's a kind of a switch, because by getting on board those train, we are choosing to go from a position of a lender to other position, that of distributors, that of matchmakers, that of brokers, and that of repository, and as the person guarantees the assets. And in this different professions, African finance, instead of getting interest, levying interest, they will be remunerated through commissions. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. BOISRIOU, for this very interesting presentation and very instructive presentation on the question of tokenizing. We also have a panel member here who has joined us, and not the least, that is the director of the Central Bank of Zimbabwe, Mr. Goroba.
Thank you so much for joining us. Since you're here, because we were mostly Francophones, so we're kind of started in French, but I'm going to do both languages so that, you know, you can catch up with either or language, right? So, merci, Monsieur BOISRIOU. En fait, il y a une question.
Thank you, Mr. BOISRIOU. In fact, there's a very interesting question, the question of token.
I think before we even talk about tokenization, we need to go back to the question of what is blockchain, because that's really the underlying technology that it uses. Qui a fait une filière scientifique ici, dans l'audience? Who has a bit of a scientific background? Okay. So what was interesting in math, you know, quand on arrive en prépa, on nous demande de définir la zone de définition d'une fonction. Et tu définis la zone de définition d'une fonction et le prof te rend le truc et tu as 0. And you don't really understand why you have 0, right? Et parce qu'il te dit, il fallait d'abord vérifier que la fonction existe. Alors c'est bête comme truc, mais c'est important. Donc quand on regarde la tokenisation, il faut comprendre ce qui sous-tend. What is the underlying technology that powers tokenization? And that technology in particular is... You can't hear me? Okay, I shouldn't be switching because the interpreters are between English and French and it gets confusing. Okay, sorry. I was going a bit too fast. So, okay, no, I'm going to stick to English, right? I think on va garder en anglais. Je pensais latin aussi, mais je suis pas trop. Anglais, faisons anglais alors. Okay, so English, for me, I mean, you guys can speak in French either. What it is, right? It's ultimately the capacity to validate any type of information, accuracy, ownership, completeness of any type of information by using simultaneously several computers to record that data. And why is it a major shift to the world we know now? It's because up to now, you would normally use a centralized party to effectively register that information. But when you use a centralized party, you're dealing with a few risks, right? Could be corruption, could be human mistake, and so on. But once the information has been recorded in 5, 7, 10 places around the world at the same time, and the sequence is being recorded, you can't tamper that information. Vous pouvez pas la changer. Sorry, I swifted. Mais donc ça, et en ça, c'est important. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
And that is very important because you no longer need a central part to validate information.
And why is it's important? Because in the case of Africa, when I went back and discussed with the elders, we thought we invented, when I spoke about blockchain, we thought it was the next best thing since sliced bread. And the elders would tell me, no, we've had that forever, except that with colonization, everything became centralized, right? And that's very important. When a kid would be born in Africa, you would bring 4 or 5 elders to verify and to say this is the kid of that person, so that if 2 are not there, you still have 3 that validate. For a piece of land, you would do the same thing, and it went like that through millennia. And in a particular context, things got centralized under the registry, but the problem if you centralize with one entity, you can have a few issues. So tokenization brings that very important technology that you cannot alter the information. When an asset is yours, and you can be verified instantly, consulting all those, putting a query to the system. And that's what makes it powerful. So now that I've put a bit of the context of using blockchain for tokenization, I would like to kind of put also a bit of important element. Africa's GDP, $2.6 trillion. Global GDP, $87 trillion. Do you know what is the estimate of Africa underground resources? It exceeds by far $1 trillion. But yet, those assets are not monetized. So the capacity of tokenizing our underground resources or other assets, could be even intellectual property, would be a way for us to start creating the value that we've been missing on our balance sheet. And in that way, it's quite important. So, Mrs. BAYO, I wanted to ask you, what got you that interested in blockchain, in tokenization, and how do you think it's going to be transformative?
Thank you very much. I believe that blockchain, would be important in the African context in the sense that over the years, and we've seen that, we say that the SMEs or the drivers of the economies that we operate in, and having access to liquidity, having access to financing has always been a problem. Now we have a lot of, I would actually call it optimizing wasted resources that have been lying fallow, not being utilized for anything. You're talking about maybe the resources that we have on the ground, that's fine, but even on overground, we have resources that are lying in safes, resources that are either in gold or in land or even in agricultural produce that cannot be utilized, that cannot be optimized to raise funds to raise funds. With the tokenization, we know at least there would be transparency in the way these assets would be valued. There would be transparency. We know, you cannot just value something at 10 billion today and then have it valued somewhere else in another country at a particular, given a particular value at another country. That would help, to bridge the gap. Over the years, we've been talking about how to encourage inter-African trade, how to even encourage intra-African trade. Amongst us, we can do it with tokenization. Instead of going to banks, of course, I'm a banker, my colleague here also is a banker, we know that we have to really look at providing financing, providing liquidity in a different way, not like the traditional banks used to do, like going in there, being told, no, we cannot give you this because you don't have the security. When you would have land that's lying there that has not been valued. But with the tokenization, all that land that has been there that has significant value, but we cannot just place a value on it, would be valued. Gold, some people have a lot of gold reserves, they could be valued, they could be utilized, and even agriculture, right? Most of the countries, we know what happened last year with the problem in Ukraine, or most of the countries we are running around, helter-skelter, thinking how are they going to even get basic food stuff, right? Why is it that it's no longer something that's attractive? Commercial banks would not provide financing for agriculture, and that's something that we need. Why would we go all the way to Ukraine to buy basic stuff that we can have with all the land that we have, all the fertile land that we have in Africa? So for me, I believe that tokenization is a way forward. And we as banks or we as Africans, we need to jump on the boat. Unless we do, we risk being left out because it makes it very easy, fast access to liquidity, right? And like I said, also making use of the resources that otherwise would have just been lying there without being utilized.
I mean, you have a great point here. Basically, there is a lot of underground and on-ground unrealized wealth that is waiting to be materialized, right?
Yeah.
Now, my question is still to you before I jump to Polari. So why are the banks not getting onto it?
Well, I believe that...
I can see people smiling in the room, but it looks like they all have the answer.
No,
I want your answer.
Banks have always been conservative,
okay.
Right? And we have always thought that we are the drivers. We've seen what has been happening over the past few years with telecoms coming in and taking over most of our business. We've seen what some of these non-bank financial institutions have been doing. So we, the banks, have been reticent up to now. Now we realize that we really have to step up and really be on board, look at how to really modernize the way we do banking, be on top of it, otherwise we would be left out. We don't have a choice. We have been reticent all of a sudden, all along, but we know that from now on we cannot be. We cannot just be lying on the fence and not doing anything. Otherwise we'll be left out.
Thank you. So the banks, en fait, should act, react, or perish.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's very interesting perspective. So in this, yes, that's exactly where I was going. You can use my microphone if you want. Oh, okay.
Is it working? Okay, thank you.
So please, Polari, carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to. Okay. We almost tokenized the mic actually. So. So is it a tough topic? Huh?
I know.
I'm just surprised to see
full room.
A full room.
This is, you can applaud yourself, guys. Yeah, congratulations.
And just after lunch. So it's either people were looking for a quiet space to
fall asleep.
To fall asleep,
With the
or they like someone on the stage that they want to see. So
no, but they knew you were there. They knew they won't fall asleep.
No, that was not the point. But so to be serious, so for the general population is a tough topic, and for banks is a tougher topic. Because if you think through it, there are three issues that we are facing if we want to become more active on tokenization. The first one is reporting. So you own assets. As a bank, your job is to own assets. So you have assets. How do you report those assets? Because don't forget that we have rules in terms of reporting. And I have a regulator here, but I have never seen a regulation around digital assets. So that's the first issue that we need to pay attention to. Then the second topic is valuation. So yes, you have assets, digital assets sitting on your balance sheet. So what is the value? What is the value of those assets? Is it a common marketplace that can provide you valuation on that asset? That is something that is yet to be done. So for a bank to own those assets, you need to address that issue as well. And then the third point is transferability. Because when you own digital assets, at some point you want to monetize those digital assets into real money, i.e. dollar, pounds, or euros.
Or CFA.
Or CFA, thanks so much, or CFA. But how do you do that transferability? How do you make sure that someone who has digital assets can transfer those assets in physical currencies? So for a bank, we need to address those two issues, and I'm happy to have a regulator here because I think that the only way to address those three issues, valuation, reporting, and transferability, is to sit down, pay attention to what is happening in the world. And Mamadou, you know that in some countries, things have been done.
Indeed.
Especially in Asia, in that direction. So I think that for Africa, we can pick up from those experiences and see how we can move in an acceleration mode toward tokenization?
I mean, I'll go now to Dr. Innocent MATSHE, who's Deputy Governor, actually, of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. First of all, I want to salute your courage to come on this contentious topic that is digital asset tokenization and cryptocurrencies. So please give him a round of applause, because not all central banks' heads would come like that and talk about it. So, and second, I also want to salute Zimbabwe, who's one of the first countries, actually, to get engaged into tokenizing gold. Not because I told them 4 years ago, but because you guys, of course, also were very visionary about it. Please share your views now that about those rules and your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me actually begin by saying agree with my colleague here, Yassin.
Closer.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, let me begin by thanking my colleagues here. But first, I will try as much as possible to deal with the questions raised. But let's remember that as you tokenize, or as you want to jump into this area of work, you need to realize that central banks are even more conservative.
That's for sure.
But we realize the central banks across many states, particularly in Africa, that we have a comparative advantage when it comes to digitizing and digitalizing across the economies of our countries. But I wanted to point out two things. The first is that you can tokenize to represent a pre-existing asset. And you can tokenize native to blockchain, which is what you were talking about.
Yes.
So what's the difference, right? So the difference is that there is an issue about the types of assets. There is an issue about whether or not they exist and trade both on blockchain and off blockchain, which pre-existing assets can do. But the other element you cannot do. You can only they can only be existing and traded on the blockchain. Now, so what types of assets? I will just quickly give you the types of assets. So for the DLT ones, you can tokenize debt securities, you can tokenize equity, you can tokenize STOs marketed as regular compliant.
Exactly.
You know, but on the other side, that's where we come to, physical assets, gold, and so on. But I accept that one of the biggest problems we are facing is regulation. So for any country or any central bank thinking about going into tokenization, you have to understand that the regulatory framework will need to change. So all the issues to do with valuation now come into play. So how are you going to do that, and so on. Then the other issue to do with, if I remember well, let me see, reporting. Again, it falls under the same, because once you've sorted the valuation and, but transferability is an interesting one. It's not easy, but nothing easy is worth doing. As they say, invention is by serendipity.
It's by serendipity.
So what are the opportunities? There are plenty, and Yassin, I'm really thankful for the list you gave. So for financial institutions, what can they do? So they can tokenize financial deposits, tokenize equities and bonds, and so on. But for us in central banks, we have reserves. And then we can tokenize other assets like gold that, at least for Zimbabwe, we have a duty to hold in our vaults as central bank reserves. But what's interesting is that you can also do the same with non-traditional assets, like real estate, agricultural land that she talked about and so on.
Indeed.
So thank you, Chair.
No, I mean, thank you very much for your contribution, and I would like to kind of bounce on it, right? So if you look at the regulation, let's say Europe have kind of validated MICA in June last year, and they gave up to June 2024 for all EU countries to jump on board. Some have done it like Cyprus yet, right? In the US, they had a bit of a different approach with a non-federal approach, but still with SEC coming and giving, good and, good and bad points, right? But at the end of the day, the trend from a regulation point of view is either it's a commodity, or it's a security, or it's currency, right? So the good thing, which I think where Africa could really jump on, and maybe that's my point to you, is we may not have to reinvent the wheel from a regulatory framework, but we don't necessarily want to copy what others have done, right? So look, we were able, I'm asking you the question, to leapfrog with mobile money. Why can't we leapfrog with tokenization? I'm asking to those three bankers here. Who wants to take this one? Governor, please.
So this is where I tell you about Zimbabwe, right? So in Zimbabwe, what we did is we used the basic commodity that we have, that we mine,
Gold.
which is gold. I should add a little caveat here that when we began, we were told, don't do it.
We were all told not do it. And they were doing it in the background up north. True story.
One of the biggest advantage of tokenization is fractionalizing assets.
Thank you.
You can break it down to small units that our people
Can afford.
can afford. So they can hold it as a commodity to save with.
Thank you.
In our case, we've moved slightly further to actually use it as a means of transacting.
Exchange, indeed,
So you can exchange value
for gold.
for gold. But the gold will still reside with the central
In
bank.
the central bank, the gold doesn't move. The ownership gets transferred.
Gets
And that's the
transferred.
power of blockchain. And that's
Yeah.
why people... But now the question on real estate, right? We have some real estate specialists in the room. All those big insurance companies are sitting on such a huge volume of assets that is illiquid that I can't sell. Yet you have $4 trillion in the informal economy looking for actual savings instrument. Polari, maybe you want to share a few perspectives on that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this section is for the bankers. So within the bank, there are two things that we are doing today that we can do better if we do tokenization. The first one is something that we call reserve-based lending, which is basically you're an oil company, you have this amount of reserves in terms of oil, and you want to raise money backed by those reserves.
Thank you, indeed, yeah.
Today, to do that is hectic, is costly. If you use tokenization, you can do that more efficiently.
Because it brings liquidity, right?
And you raise liquidity, okay?
Yes.
Without going through the process of reserve-based lending, which is a very complicated process.
Indeed,
okay?
yeah.
So that, in my view, when you're talking about having a leapfrog, that's something that we can think about in terms of using tokenization instead of reserve-based lending.
Okay.
The second one, if
Yes.
I may, the second example that I want to share is the example around asset recycling. And it is about what you are saying. So, and it's good that we are here because all the countries are facing today limited space to raise liquidity, right?
Correct.
But all those countries are sitting on assets, roads, railways. Those roads, that infrastructure, in fact, generate revenues.
They do.
So how can you tokenize by recycling the existing assets that you have to raise money and build additional infrastructure? So that is also something that we need to think about. And there's a path to do that. and we know people that want to do it. Africa 50 is one of them. So I think definitely there are different schemes that we can think about going forward when thinking about funding sovereign by using tokenization.
Thank you. So my question to you, and those are very important points. Thank you, Polare, for sharing them. Is like Africa doesn't lack the creativity, the innovation, and the forward thinking. We've shown it in the past, and the two examples that you give actually can really get us there, right? Now, my question is, what is it going to take? Regulation, it looks like we have identified the issue. The products, they are here. Now, what is stopping us?
That is for Yassin.
Yassin.
Okay, for me, I think the regulatory framework, actually we need it, because when we're talking about maybe even the infrastructure like roads and maybe other assets that government or maybe governments or businesses have, you know, we need a regulatory framework to make sure that in the event, you know, we could, or even maybe a secondary market as well, because we could invest, investments could be done, you know, in those tokens, and then eventually when it comes to the need to dematerialize that or to materialize those, get income or like the cash, liquid cash, it becomes a problem if there is no secondary market. But then we also need the commitment, of course, of the regulators. We need that, as well as the judiciary, because we need all those to be put in place. One country doing it is okay, but you know, we need all of Africa to be thinking like that,
Okay.
so that we could make use of it from the, within the African context.
So what is interesting, right? Like you have been a banker,
Yeah.
right? Now I'm on the other side. I'm the entrepreneur. So banks, if banks are waiting for a regulatory framework, for a secondary market, for judiciary, then, I mean, how is it going to happen if we're all waiting, right? I mean, so here's the very important point. So the way, again, other part of the countries have addressed it, they create a regulatory sandbox. Creating a regulatory sandbox, you admit you don't have the answer, but you bring the entrepreneurs so that you can co-create the regulatory framework. Why don't we do that? Mr. Governor?
Okay.
Across Africa, there are several countries that have regulatory sandboxes.
The Anglophones, right? Not pointing fingers.
Oh dear, sorry, I didn't realize that in the Francophones there is none. But I'm hoping they will join the bandwagon.
No, they're working hard at it.
That's excellent. I think the way to think about it is to go to mobile money. When mobile money started taking off in Kenya especially, that's what I know. I mean, I'm sure there are other experiences. The central bank had to take a decision. What do you do? And basically the decision was nothing, absolutely nothing.
Wow.
So
And what happened after that?
the central bank didn't do anything until the transfers started
becoming
hitting-
significant.
No, until they started hitting the money. Because you can transfer amongst yourselves and no cash is involved.
Yeah,
But once you start getting into the
the cash portion.
cash side, then you step in.
That's where money talks.
So the idea is you let creativity push the way in which the development drives the economy. And then you step in and say, listen, we have an issue here, here, and here. And I think that it's a risky way of doing it, but as central bankers, sometimes you have to step back because you don't want to be one of the players.
You don't want to be the obstacle.
You are the referee.
Yeah.
And you make sure that you create a regulatory framework that is able to create an environment for economic agents to interact.
So I have a question for you. Today, BlackRock, who owns our largest asset management firm in the world, $7 trillion of assets under management. You have HSBC, who's done a team of 200 people just for blockchain, just for tokenization, 200, and another 100 just for AI around it. So when you have HSBC, who plan the tokenization market over the next 7 years to be $20 trillion. When you know that Africa is sitting on more than $100 trillion, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go and tokenize? And how long is it going to take us to get a regulatory, have to wait to get a regulatory framework for it to be ready when others come and tokenize?
So when you think about it, we were pushed by developments. We're pushed by developments in blockchain technology. And you will be surprised. I can give you my honest assessment. In 12 months, countries across Africa will have a regulatory framework in place.
Yes. And
not everyone, but most of those countries will have. So within the central bank and the Association of Central Banks of Africa, there is a great appreciation of the speed at which we have to go. Otherwise, developments in the digital world will start pushing.
Left behind.
Yeah.
So which leads me to this thing, and there's this, maybe there's the gap between central banks and financial institutions. 2 years ago, 90 countries and 90 central banks were already working on a digital sovereign currency. And the African central banks met in May with the IMF to actually work on it. And I know indeed, but why is this such a gap, right? Why are you all working on the next big thing and having those who are actually making in contact with the customers be scared about that next big thing? And it's a very important question because we've discussed it, I mean, in Washington, in New York, and it's good we're having this conversation in Africa. Is it discredit or destroy while we get ready? Or how do we get all those people in this room to quickly embark and not just discover a year down the road that you've been working on it for 4 years?
Let me say something very quick, and it's not exactly an answer to your question. And it says, as Africans, we have to embrace the capacity that we have.
Thank you.
Young people on this continent are very, very creative.
Thank you.
And a lot of the times we are procuring technology from outside Africa.
Thank you. A round of applause, please. A round of applause. It's important. Thank you very much.
So, and the technology we are procuring is priced at almost double the price it is elsewhere.
We have one for you, and it's cheaper.
I tell you, I know that. But I want to encourage all of us in this room to use our young people to develop technologies that are appropriate for our needs. Sometimes we're buying a Ferrari when all we need is a bike.
True.
But the bike will be scalable. The bike will be answering our exact needs. So the technologies we need, this is why mobile money has taken off.
Such a great success.
Exactly, because it was an appropriate
Simple,
technology.
efficient, yes.
Yeah. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. One last word from each of you before we get the question from the audience. If there was a silver bullet, I think Mr. Governor gave us an important one, and it is a silver bullet. I'll go to you, Polari. If there was a silver bullet for us to leapfrog like we leapfrogged 15 years ago with mobile money, what would it be?
The good news is that
There's no silver bullet.
thanks so much.
Okay, one thing that you would prioritize that will change the game.
I think you're going to like this. I think certainly what we need to do is if we can tokenize our mineral resources, especially gold, that's a game changer. That could be a game changer.
Thank you. I didn't tell him, right? So no, but it is, right? I mean, I'm just going to come to that. The former monetary system was backed by gold, right? 71, it got decoupled. And what happened, it means some are allowed to print as much as they want with not affecting inflation, and the others have to just struggle. Now you have BRICS, who came with the next digital currency. What is it going to back by? gold, lithium, copper. China, to your point, launched their digital currency, of central bank digital currency. It is backed 25% or 20% by gold. Guess who has the most gold in the planet? Africa, 48% of the global gold deposit. That's a silver bullet. Thank you. I'll take that one. I'll take note. Polari said, silver. So, Yassin, please share your...
Okay, for me, my take on this is you have big institutions in this continent that have actually made inroads into what we are talking about. Afreximbank, for instance, have financed...
Closer to the...
Okay, hello. Yeah. We have banks, the reason I would mention Afreximbank is, we work closely with them as well as BAYO and other big banks, but I know some of the initiatives that Afreximbank have put on the plate to provide financing, for instance, against future receipts. All those are a form of maybe tokenization of the resources that we have. My colleague here talked about infrastructure. We have roads that provide money, that provide funds on a daily basis. If only we talked about Africa 50, that's an initiative that many people think it's bizarre, but it's basically what we are talking about, making sure that we do it in a transparent way so that the man in the street understands that we are not selling away their future benefits, but we are using it today for the benefit of the people today, rather than waiting 50 years down the line to get access, to the benefits of those resources that we have. The resources on the ground, like I said, are there, but we also have resources on the ground, itself, above ground, that we can make use of right now. My take on is that the banks, the big banks, should be speaking the same language. Let them work together because most of them have great ideas, but unless they work together as a team to push the continent forward, it may not happen. They have what it takes. We are there to work with them, and that's it.
Thank you. No, that's great. You have quite a major big bank next to you, so I think he heard the message. We need to thank also AFIS because they play this catalyst role, which is what I was discussing with Ramatulai, in allowing us to have those conversations, but to also work towards it so that next year we've made major progress. I'll come back to you, Mr. Governor, for your silver bullet. I know you had one, so you, Governor, you, the regulator, will give you a second bonus. And then we'll ask the room to ask questions.
I have two silver bullets, not one.
Yeah, two, okay.
And I agree with Polari. And as you know, as Zimbabwe, we've gone that route. We think that the way to go for us, because we produce gold, gold will is easier to tokenize.
Simple.
And it's not the only one. Some countries don't have gold, but they have lithium. They have, other nickel and other.
And lithium gained 600% this year.
When others were going down.
Exactly.
So you can see where we're coming from. The second, again, let me emphasize, is digitalization.
Yeah.
And that resides in our youth.
True.
So the second silver bullet is the use.
The next generation.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And to go to your point, thank you. A round of applause for our panelists. We're going to take some questions from the audience. We have exactly 10 minutes left. 5 minutes left. So, yes, sir, go ahead. If you can stand, we'll hear you, I think. Oh, okay, we can get somebody with a mic. Yeah, speak in the meantime while we get you the mic. Yeah, go ahead with French, no worries.
Interpreters needed. I would like to connect this topic with the previous one we have relating to exchanges, which also dealt with currencies in the market. Behind that, we have assets which could be tokenized so as to mobilize funds. But I would like to know whether the local market has enough capacity for absorption. That's my first question. And the last one now, what is the capacity of consumption capacity of a local market on these very issues? Thank you. Well, informal economy in Africa is 60%, which is not taken into account. So when we talk of
Sorry, if we speak about a GDP of $2.8 trillion, it means that there's $4 trillion that is not accounted for in the economy. Mostly cash, mostly under the mattresses, etc. It's untapped. Yet, we go and raise $100 million and we queue in London, in Paris, etc. Right? So it's actually much bigger than we think. And once you start tokenizing assets, you create also liquidity. That's a very important thing. The infrastructure that you were talking about, those are multi-billions of dollars once tokenized, create the liquidity for you to actually invest in other things. Remember, finance is based on two fundamentals: asymmetry of information and collateral. Right? Our people here don't have the information, but they have the collateral. If you give them the information, you were talking about distribution, you have more people with access to mobile phone than access to water. That's how you manage asymmetry of information. I hope I answered. Next question. Oui, allez-y.
Hi. So you were talking about local informal sector. We are also talking about all the economy that is gathered from this informal sector. I would like to highlight and hear the bankers on one subject, financial education. Because if we need local sector to use those products, how bankers, how regulators can promote and develop the financial education in order to gather these local economy that we cannot actually use on our local transaction.
Je vais répondre à Sidi en français parce que je...
let me go into French because I know he speaks and understands French. It's a very important issue that you raise, and this has to do with many challenges that we are facing. In addition to the learning and the second element, which is education, which is the second driver. Last week we held in Abidjan a salon on saving in Abidjan, and what we try to do is to develop first an awareness raising, financial awareness raising, secondly in financial education, and thirdly financial economic awareness raising. So we thought of having modules that will be devoted to many countries that will be part of the curricula in our universities. And even this weekend I was watching a video in which a girl of the age of 8 were talking of finance, the difference between the various risks, the importance of saving, collateralization, different regimes. And 8 years, she knows all that we are doing with the tokenization. We will win the battle when we take into account two tools: technology, digitalize, and also secondly have Africans that are educated in that area.
To ask a question.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. My name is Goodson Kapaso from Zambia. I've liked the... Come closer? Okay, thank you. I've liked the discussion on tokenization, but just maybe shed more light in terms of how value will be created, especially that most Africans are not the ones that actually do the mining of the gold or the other precious minerals. So when you look at the value in most of the natural resources you find that the true value or the higher value, it comes from when labor has been added to it, when it's been pulled out of the ground. So yes, we have to celebrate that we can do this, but are we going to achieve the true value?
I see where you're going. Okay. And thank you so much for asking this question, because I've been having this conversation with leaders for the past 18 months. So, first of all, you were made to believe that what you're sitting on has no value. It's not true. So you need to decolonize your mind on that one. And the reason is simple. The land as a real estate, even if you haven't built something on it, it has value, right? So why something that is you're sitting underneath wouldn't have value? And it's had value since capitalism existed, but you were not made to know it did. Let me give you a basic example. You would have, and I'm going to be very dry on this conversation because it's an open conversation and it's an issue that we really need to solve as Africans. And not just Africans, as a lot of emerging countries. Junior mining comes. Government gives a concession, not knowing if there is something. The junior mining would basically, do a bit of research. And if they're smart, they go to Toronto or Sydney, they flip the asset, and there is 200-300 million. They sit as a 100% owner of a concession. You might not be aware that they've raised 200-300 million because they mix it with other assets. And what you thought had no value suddenly has $300 million value, and you have no clue. Second, if that junior mining has a bit of integrity and it committed to the country, they'll come back, use that portion of the capital to effectively start dredging. I'm not even talking about extracting. And dredging, it takes them to feasibility study and then to bankability study. Suddenly, the value has been multiplied by 5, still nothing off the ground. You had $1.5 billion. You still haven't extracted zip. And now, and then you use that as a collateral, right? And you start now raising a loan against the value of the asset based on whichever bankability study. $300 million, $400 million value of the mining and project 3 years later. Now you're 7 years down the road, you start extracting. And if your government, if you have the bad deals, like most of the cases, you get 5% royalties. If you have a good deals, maybe you get 10, 20% shares of that particular asset. 10 years down the road, we don't have 10 years. And on top of that, 10 years down the road, you have a crumb of the actual asset you've been sitting on for generations. That's what the problem is. What tokenization solves is very simple. I have this asset, I use satellites, I use drones, 3D electromagnetic resonance. We know where the technologies are. You have them in Australia, in Russia, in Ukraine, in Israel, and in the United States. We've done the whole study. You use, and you interpolate into it costs 200 times cheaper, takes 5 times less time. Suddenly you have an exact accuracy of what you have underneath your feet at 4 meters distance, 3-4 kilometers down the earth. And you think you don't have an asset? Yes, you do. Gold price? Okay, it's not out yet, but you apply a discount. I'm giving you the whole playbook right now. You apply a discount to it because that's what they do. It's unrealized asset, and you apply 60%, 70%, depends if it's proven reserves or not. Now, let's say you find the digital information gives you 2 million ounces, right? Now you have the gold price per ounce is $2,000. You have $4 billion of estimated resource. You apply 60% discount, right? You still at 2.4 whatever billion dollar, $2.4 billion that you can tokenize. Suddenly you have value. So that's why we need to really get ahead of that brainwash. We're really sitting on more than $100 trillion. And the day we realize that, the game will change. Are you ready or not? Because once you tokenize that, people have a mobile phone. It's digital. You're talking about secondary market, you work with mobile operators. We're doing that at the moment. They have Momo for MTN and so on. It's a security. Then people, you fractionalize. They can buy from as low as 6 cents. That's what we do with gold. So The game has changed. It's very, very important that we understand that the era we're going to has shifted from paper-backed monetary system to asset-backed monetary system. Those who are in the know, but they've made sure you wouldn't know. Thank you. I think we're going to close. Sorry, I was a bit long on that one, but it's very important to understand. So no more question. I want to thank our panelists here for their brilliant intervention and very rich contribution to this fundamental topic. As you can see, I'm very passionate, and I'm so excited to be with passionate people sharing this, this important moment that I'm sure will be remembered. So thank you so much, and thank you, Charles, also for your kind contribution. Over to the next panel. Thank you.